Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL Podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL Podcast, your podcast to cruise a little smarter. I'm your host, Lake, and I am once again joined by my co-host, Christy. Christy, how are you today?
I am well, Lake. How are you?
I am doing pretty good. As always, excited for this episode. We've got a numerous number of cruises that we're going to be discussing, numerous cruise lines, because we are not just talking about one trip, but we're going to be discussing Alaska and its variety of ports. And that is fun because we all have shared, and for some of us, multiple shared experiences to contribute to this conversation.
Yeah, Alaska is such an amazing destination. So, and I know a lot of our listeners, we have first-time people going this summer, or next summer. So I'm really excited that we're going to be able to put the show out. But before that, you're on vacation this week. How exciting is that?
Very exciting, very much needed. And we have springtime surprise at the end of this week, which I am looking forward to as well. And lots of recording sessions.
Yeah, lots of them. So people can get ready for some fun new episodes.
I was very excited when today's guest reached out to us because, as I mentioned, they have done 3 different Alaska sailings and also a land and sea portion, which is something that Disney does not offer, surprisingly. Now, we have seen with the 2026 calendar, Disney is trying to increase its ship count up to Alaska. There's a lot of competition in Alaska, and I think there's a lot of good options, and there are some companies that have been doing it for a long time and have some really unique offerings in comparison to what you will find for Disney. With that, I would like to welcome our guest to the show. Kira, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about Alaska.
We are excited as well. Well, why don't you start by giving our guests a little bit of your Disney cruising and Alaska cruising background?
Sure. We started going to Disney World when I have twins that are 20 right now, when they were 3 years old, and we are DVC members. We took our first cruise with the twins when they were about 7 years old, and we've been cruising in Disney World kind of back and forth ever since. And people always ask me, like, your 20-year-olds still like to go on Disney Cruise Line? And I'm like, absolutely. It's just what they look forward to is different now than when they were 7. We are gold cruisers. My husband and I will be platinum very soon at the end of April.
Yay!
So our kids are a few cruises behind us because we're empty nesters, so we get to cruise a little bit more, but that's okay. So that's our background. And in terms of Alaska, I have been to Alaska 3 times in the last 3 summers. We went in 2022 on DCL. I went in 2023 on Norwegian Cruise Line with my sister-in-law, and then our whole family and another family with college-age kids went on Princess Cruise last summer. So that would have been 2024.
Goals, Lake, goals.
I love it. Before we continue we're going to discuss this Princess sailing a little bit at length with the land and sea portion, but then we are going to discuss all of these ports, including Christy and I's experiences, since it is just about that time for listeners to be looking to book their items for this summer. So Christy, why don't you go ahead and give the listeners your Alaska cruising background as well?
So I cruised Princess to Alaska from Seattle, a 7-night cruise it was a big multi-gen trip with my family. My son was 5. And so that was Princess in 2018. And then we went to Alaska in 2023, I believe, on Disney.
And I have been to Alaska one time. I sailed on the Norwegian Bliss out of Seattle. And I am definitely looking forward to getting back. And we will discuss my thoughts on Norwegian in Alaska kind of once we turn it to compare and contrast at the end of the show. Why don't we go ahead and start with why you decided to book this Princess land and sea combo?
The main thing that we were looking at when we were booking this land and sea combo was we had been to Alaska already. And so we wanted to do some of the same ports, but we wanted to do something different. Also, 2 of the key things being we really wanted to see Denali National Park and hopefully get a peek at Denali. And the second thing that we wanted to be able to do was go to Glacier Bay National Park, something that DCL cannot do. Many cruise lines cannot go to Glacier Bay National Park. And I had gone the summer before on Norwegian and just absolutely loved it. And so we were going with another family, and that's kind of what they wanted to do as well. So Princess really had the best options for us and the timing of when we needed to go. We went mid-July.
How did you pick the land and sea trip that you did?
My goodness, there are so many to pick from when you go on Princess Web. The main factor was timing. We really needed to go at a specific time. All three of the four teenagers that we were with all swim competitively in the summertime, so we needed to work around their swim schedule. And then all four were going off to college. And so we needed to have this in the middle of July, essentially. So we all knew we could only be gone about a week and a half. You can do 2 weeks, you can do 3 weeks. I mean, it's really crazy, all the different itineraries. And so for us, the factors were timing, location, and amount of time we were going to be gone. Yeah, so we flew to Anchorage. From Anchorage, we spent the night at a hotel there that Princess puts you up in. Then you got on a bus, and we took the bus to Denali, to the Princess Wilderness Lodge in Denali, which was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. We stayed there for 4 nights. We did different things there. Some things we did through Princess, some we booked on our own. Then we took a bus to Denali National Park, got on the train, and did a 9-hour train ride through Alaska to Whittier, which is where we got on the ship. We did the Sapphire Princess, and then we did a southbound cruise from Whittier to Vancouver. In Vancouver, we stayed an extra night and went to Whistler.
Oh, I love that.
Which we've done twice now.
Of all the items you did in the land portion, what was like the favorite activity or excursion?
Well, we kicked it off with a bang. And on the first day that we were there, we did an excursion that we booked on our own called Fly Denali. And it was the 8 of us in a plane. And we flew 100 miles out over Denali National Park. We landed on the Ruth Glacier, got off on the Ruth Glacier and walked around, and then got back in and flew back to the Wilderness Lodge. I mean, it was incredible. The pictures, the scenery. I mean, we saw Denali literally up front and close. And to be standing out on a glacier in Denali, like with Denali behind you, was truly incredible.
I want to do this lake.
It was expensive, but it was worth every penny. Like, it was the coolest thing. And we've done a lot of excursions over the course of our travel. And my kids will tell you this was hands down the best excursion we've ever done.
Who did you book it with? How?
Fly Denali. And the reason I picked them was because they were fairly close to the Denali Princess Wilderness Lodge, and they offered transportation. So they came in their shuttle bus, picked us up, drove us to their little airport, it's called in Healy. It was maybe 10, 15 minutes from the lodge. And then they drove you back because we didn't have a car. So there's another one that runs out of Talkeetna, but Talkeetna is not close to the Denali Princess Lodge, and we would have had to arrange our own transportation, and that just wasn't going to work. So it was incredible.
Besides taking the train from Denali, was part of your land portion doing Denali, being in Denali at all, or no?
Yes, the bus tour. In hindsight, it was hard. I mean, the bus tour was a lot of older folks. You really couldn't see much from the bus. If there was an animal, it was really hard to see it. It was cool to see Denali in the park itself, but we ended up taking the bus out and then getting off and taking the stop and go bus that drops you off and lets you hike on the way back, because we needed to get back because the guys were going fly fishing. And then, so that was included with the price of our tour package, that bus tour. Everything else we did on our own. We did go back into the park one day and hike, and that was on our own also. The fly fishing, that was booked through Princess, but that was a separate cost. And then we did a dog kennel tour, and that was booked through Princess. Then they shuttled us and took us to this really, really cool dog kennel. And we learned about the dog kennels. Oh, and then some of our group did whitewater rafting down the river, and that was booked through Denali, but also an additional cost. We were busy.
Yeah.
As you should be.
Right.
Yeah. And we almost were not able to stay at that lodge because if you recall last summer, the fire that broke out in Denali National Park. Yep. So when we were there, the lodge overlooks the river and you could see where the fire was. And actually, they were still putting out hot spots of the fire while we were there. So we sat on the deck at the back of the lodge, and then these helicopters came in, went down in the river, scooped up water, and then took it to the hot spots, and were dumping water on the hot spots. So that was kind of cool. But thankfully, it worked out. We were able to still stay at the lodge.
Incredible.
Would you do this land and sea portion again? And if you did, would you have any reservations about booking it through Princess again, or do you think you would want to try something else?
100%, I would do it again. I mean, you can even go up to Fairbanks. Also, Holland America does the same thing, and the Holland America Lodge is right next to the Denali Lodge. The Denali Lodge was beautiful. I mean, it was, and some people just go and stay at the Denali Lodge, and they never even do the cruise portion. And I would do that again, too. I would love to spend more time in Denali and explore that. But the train portion was lovely. That was really cool, and we didn't have the best of weather, but still you could see, I mean, the beauty was just incredible, absolutely incredible. So yeah, I would definitely do it again.
As I mentioned, we have a numerous number of cruises we are going to be discussing, and some of the most amazing cruise ports that you can possibly visit here. So in no particular order, let's go ahead and start with Juneau, capital of Alaska. I think one of the cruise ports where you are going to have the most options in what you want to do. Definitely a good diversity of excursions that you can either do on your own or book through pretty much whatever cruise ship you choose to book. Kira, why don't you go ahead and start with kind of some highlights of things that you have done on your various cruises in Juneau and what your recommendation is.
I will say I have not done any cruise excursions at any of the ports through the cruise lines. I've booked it all on my own. I just find that I get a better deal. I get better time slots. It's worked out in our favor every time. So that's the one thing I will say. So in Juneau, the first cruise we went on, we did a Mendenhall Glacier whale watch excursion that was combined. It was fine. Mendenhall Glacier, for me and the rest of our group, was kind of like a one and done. It's very touristy. It felt like a tourist trap, very busy, a lot of people. And then we did a whale watch, and it was one of those boats, double-decker boats with just gobs and gobs of people. So it made it difficult to see whales, even though we saw whales and it was still incredible. It was just too many people for us. So then when I went in 2023, I did actually this by myself with a random group of people. I did a 5 glacier float plane. It took off right from downtown Juneau, flew up the fjord, and then went over 5 glaciers, and then it landed at a lodge called Taku Lodge. And you land in front of a glacier, and then you get off, and then they feed you this fresh salmon feast at this lodge, and you walk the trails, and they teach you about the glacier, and then you get back on the seaplane and fly over the glaciers and land back in downtown Juneau. Absolutely incredible. Incredible. Last year when we went, some of the group wanted to whale watch. So we did a private whale watch excursion with Harv and Marvs out of Juneau. They picked us up right down at the port, drove us to the boats. We got on a boat that fit just the 8 of us, and we went out. Much, much better experience. Not as many whales, but just more intimate. We could see things better. We weren't fighting for spots on deck to see the whales.
And Christy, what are your highlights from Juneau?
Let me just say first that I want to be in Kara's family and
same.
Do everything that she has said so far. Sounds amazing. And I just want to go and do those with her. So I have done a whale watching, and then I've seen the Mendenhall Glacier twice at Juneau. But both times I did it through a smaller group. So, and I give people that advice all the time, my clients, that make sure if you are booking it through the cruise line or whoever you're booking it through, that it says small group tour, because it makes a world of difference than going on those double-decker boat trips out of Juneau. The one time we did it through Princess, we did it through the cruise line, and we were still able to do the small group, and it was a hike in the Mendenhall Park, and then Glacier Park, however it's called. And then you end at the glacier, which I kind of loved seeing the glacier. And the second time that we went, it was just sort of like our bus stopped at a different location and you saw it from further away. You didn't get to see it from in the, like where you hike up to actually see the glacier. And I liked the hike up to the glacier way better than seeing it from like, I don't know, bus parking or wherever it was that we saw it. But both times I did the small group. The second time I booked it alone or privately through Project Expedition. And I will say that I was not as happy with the boat or with the guide. That was not so much a guide. And it was just that particular summer and just that particular guide. But I actually enjoyed it through the cruise line a lot better, because they like got out the charts to tell us about, you know, you can identify the whales by their tails. And so they got out those charts to show it to us, and the boat was better and you can move inside and outside better. So I guess I would you want to do a small group, but maybe check to make sure it's not too small of a boat, because it was really hard to move from inside to outside on the small boat that we had.
And I have one experience in Juneau. We did the sled dog summer camp, which I think pretty much every cruise line offers. I'm not going to lie. Katie and I, when we booked this because it was something we would be able to do with my grandmother. And now I wouldn't say it was accessible. She doesn't need any additional accessibility, but you know, she can't be up and running around and hiking as well. But we thought this was going to be like top tier, kitschy, touristy type of attraction. And we were actually super surprised with how authentic it was, because we got there and they sat us down and the dude was like, hey, my name is so-and-so. My great-grandfather started the Iditarod.
That's so cool.
That's so cool.
And he is like, yep, me and my brother here, we have both raced the Iditarod. He's like, these are our dogs. He's like, we have raised these dogs from puppies. And now they do like take you on a ride and it's on like a go-kart type of thing. But you are still with that same guide that, you know, again, it's their dogs. They're telling you their names, their personalities, you know, letting you interact with them. And of course, you get to see the puppies and all of that. But again, we're super impressed with just how authentic the experience actually was compared to what we thought it was going to be like. So we were actually super happy with that. And that was nice, too, because it was only it was like maybe 3 hours. So if you have a longer time in Juneau, you could have explored downtown. We were actually able to couple it with another excursion, which I will circle back around to when we talk about some glacier viewing. However, I think Kira wins in the awesome Juneau experiences here, which I think is going to be the
win every time.
I think so too. Let's go ahead and talk about Skagway, a port that I have not been to.
A very cool port. The first year that we went, we did a private bus. So we went up into the Yukon, into Canada, and made several stops along the way, kind of based on the tour guide. We stopped at the Yukon suspension bridges. We stopped at several different waterfalls. We went all the way up to Emerald Lake, which is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful lake up in the Yukon. Stunning. Then we came back down and we stopped at some different lakes. And then we stopped at something called the Tushy Dog Kennels. And Lake, it was very much similar to your experience that you had. This is run by somebody who runs the Iditarod. In fact, she just finished 4th at this year's Iditarod, Michelle Phillips. And these are her dogs. These are her puppies, and she actually drives the four-wheeler and takes you around. And it was an incredible experience. I mean, these dogs are just so cool. And the scenery while they're pulling you around was just spectacular. So that was almost an all-day thing that we did in Skagway in 2022. In 2023, my sister-in-law and I actually did something where we got on a ferry and we went to Haines, Alaska, which is about a 45-minute ferry ride from Skagway. From there, we got on a bus and we went to an eagle float preserve. And basically you get on like a raft and you have a guide that's rafting you, and you have about 5 people on your raft. And you are floating through a preserve where eagles live. And it's one of the last rivers in Alaska to freeze. So they get 5 different kinds of salmon. So the eagles are essentially there all year long. So you're floating on this float raft through the river with the guide doing all the work for you, just looking at all the eagles that live here and migrate. It was incredible. Another incredible excursion. And then last summer, we kind of did the same thing that we did in 2022. We did a private excursion up into the Yukon with a lot of the same stops. We stopped at the Yukon Suspension Bridge, but this time we just spent more time there. We actually paid to get into the park and walked around and saw things that we didn't see the first time. We saw bears, we saw mountain goats. It was incredible. And that trip up into the Yukon essentially follows the same path as the train that a lot of people do. It's just the train doesn't make the stops, and you can actually see the train off in the distance going. This is just a little more intimate and you can make more stops.
And I did the Yukon tour as well in 2018, but we did it through the cruise line. And I've talked about this before. We also did the train. So we did the bus and then the train back. And the one thing I would say is, I don't think I was prepared for how long it was going to take. I don't know why. I didn't know that it was so many hours long, this tour. My 5-year-old was not super interested in it. And we had some moments when we were actually stopping for lunch at where there was a little sled dog camp. I don't think this one was run by anybody who ever does sled dogs. I mean, probably, but also it was very touristy. And, Blake had a moment. He definitely had a hard time there. But it was a really good tour. The scenery was like some of the most beautiful. I think it was a bit lost on a 5-year-old, honestly, but I would do it again. And I like the idea of doing it privately versus a bus of 45 people or more. And then the train is so cool. I don't think it's something I have to do multiple times, but it was very cool. And the second time we went to Skagway, we actually did a helicopter ride to I believe it was the Denver Glacier. And there they had a sled dog camp where you could actually do in the snow a sled dog trail. And that was actually very cool My son loved operating, controlling, leading, whatever it's called, the sled dogs, one loop around. The helicopter ride was absolutely incredible. And I did look because the helicopter loading station is right off of the ship. It's whether you do it privately or as part of the cruise line, it honestly is the same experience. I did book it through the cruise line because it was like $20 difference in price. And I was like, maybe there's a tiny bit more insurance by doing it through the cruise line. I don't know. But I want them, to have the fear of Disney Cruise Line in their, like with them when they're, helicoptering my son and I, all three of us. One thing to remember though, with helicopter tours is, and it's in the fine print that I feel like nobody notices, and we were prepared for it, but they divide you up by weight. So you have to share your weight, and then they won't necessarily put your whole family next to each other. So my son and I got to shared a seat up front, but my husband was like all the way in the other corner in the back of the helicopter. And for us, it was perfectly fine. And I'm pretty sure that because my kid was like 10, I believe that's what he was, 9 or 10, they were going to keep one of us next to him. And I'm glad it was me, but they'll mix and match you based upon your weight. So just keep that in mind if you're doing a helicopter tour. But that was pricey, but like you can take a whole Bahamian cruise for the same price, but it was totally worth it.
Yes, this is the port that is on my cannot miss next time I go to Alaska.
100% lake.
Well, probably the thing I'm most interested is doing a little bit of the train, and then there are a lot of hikes you can get off the train and either hike back or hike around and pick the train back up. I am hoping that this weekend, actually, I have some guests that are avid hikers that are willing to talk about all of the hikes they've done in Alaska.
One more thing before we move on from Skagway, and we should have said this with Juneau. Juneau has a really cool downtown that you do have to take usually a little bus into, and most of the cruise lines will help you get there and back at least like Disney does, and Princess should as well. I'm honestly not sure what NCL does in terms of getting you back to and from the downtown, but Skagway is completely walk off. Like you walk off, you walk by, you walk maybe 10 minutes down the port area or whatever, and you're in the town. And there's a bunch of little bars there. And like Juneau has one of the most popular bars ever. I forget what it's called, but I feel like you would know.
The Red Dog Saloon.
There you go. Skagway has a bunch of little bars as well. And there's like a bookstore and an art place. And it's just a really cute downtown walkable. I definitely would recommend doing that. And if you were taking the train and booking it alone or not, it's like right there. You can just walk to the train. Definitely plan to walk around a little bit as part of your day.
Let's move into Ketchikan, what I would consider the kitschiest and touristy of these towns. If there is any sort of, little magnet trinket type of thing that you collect, you will find this in mass here. There are many, many options. My qualm with Ketchikan is really make sure you are checking where your ship is going to be porting that day. There is really 3 main options. If you are lucky, you'll be in one of the main berths. I think there's 4 of them, and those are great. Ship pulls up. You are right downtown, easy walking. They will pack this town full of ships, though, to the point that many times there is at least 1 or 2 ships that's going to be tendering. So something just to keep in mind, that does increase the time it takes you to get off and back onto the ship. And then there is a new port that Disney actually will be utilizing, but Norwegian tends to utilize it pretty frequently, called Ward Cove. This is about a 10 to 15 minute bus ride. Now, it does have kind of a cool, mall vibe. It's an old mill that they've really renovated. There's a bar in there. They've put live music. It's a cool area, but you do have to take these school buses to get to downtown. And there is, quite frankly, a lot of drama with people having to line up for the buses heck of early to make sure they're back to Ward Cove in time. So it is probably the biggest process of all of these options. But Kira, why don't you tell us what amazing things you have done in Ketchikan?
I know. I feel like she should have to go last because she's too.
So I don't know. In Ketchikan, the first year that we went in 2022, we had a pretty epic excursion. We did an excursion where we were picked up right down in the little marina there, and we got on a boat. There were 6 of us, and we went. It was about an hour and 15-minute boat ride, kind of through the misty fjords into the Tongass National Forest, and then we got out and very short hike to a bear viewing platform that only goes from the end of July through like August and early September. It's a very limited time. And you basically are on a viewing platform above the creek where the bears are. You could either take the boat there or you could take a seaplane there. We opted not to take the seaplane in case of weather, and that was canceled. We'd rather be in a boat and ensure that we could get there. So it was just, there were maybe 11 of us there, a total. And then we were there for about 35 to 40 minutes before we finally saw a bear. And then a bear came out, and he was out, and we watched this bear catch salmon in the creek, one salmon after another, skin it, eat it, go back in. We have some of the most incredible pictures. And then we did a short little like walk right from there up to an area called Margaret Creek that is like truly, we have pictures all over our house of Margaret Creek because it was just truly incredible. And it was a beautiful day, so that helped. And then we took the boat back. Ketchikan is kitschy, but it's fun to walk around and look at all the different things. There's a really cute bookstore there that we found. There's a really great crepe place that we like. When I went in 2023, I got to experience Ward Cove. And so I did not take the bus into town. I actually did an excursion from there through NCL that was kind of just like a hike in the Tongass National Forest. It was okay. It was something to do. Honestly, NCL isn't in Ketchikan port for very long. I mean, I feel like we docked at like 10 in the morning and it was like the ship was pulling away at like 4 p.m. I mean, it was a super short amount of time. So I was really hesitant to book anything on my own that time. So I did this guided hike, and it was good. I mean, it was cool to see the forest and be in it. And then last year, our group split up. The guys went deep sea fishing with Real Alaska Fishing Charter and caught halibut that we're still enjoying here at home. And then us girls were going to do a seaplane over the Misty Fjords, and it got canceled because of the weather. We just walked the town. We went into town twice and just kind of explored, and we did take a cab. We found a cab driver and we paid him, and he took us out to this spot where it was kind of quiet and remote and nobody was there to look for bears, and there were no bears there, but there were eagles, and he took us to a cool waterfall. He was the local guy, and I think he was like, yeah, $25. And I think we ended up giving him $40 because it was like a 20-minute ride out and a 20-minute ride back, but we had our own little personal tour.
My first time in Ketchikan, we did the kitschiest thing of doing the lumberjack show. Now, my nephews were like maybe 9 and 11, and their dad was also very much into it, and they were very into it. My kid enjoyed it, but it was definitely like a scream loud and root for this guy to climb up, right? It's all, they pretend it's a competition, but it's clearly all staged. Definitely something to do with your family if you have younger kids and you're into that kind of thing.
And it's close to the port, right?
It's very close to the port. And you can book that on your own, but the cruise lines do get the best show times. So you just have to watch that to get back to your ship on time. And then the second time we did a tour through the cruise line that took us out to see, it was like a wildlife. It was a bus to a little boat, and the boat took us out, and it was really good. We saw a million eagles, and that was probably the animal we saw the most of, but they just talked about all the eagles in the area, and the crew were really good. They gave the kids a little scavenger hunt card, and then they all got, I think you had to be under 9, and they all got a little eagle. It was very cute. So I would recommend that. And that was through Disney.
Yeah. So we were blessed with beautiful weather this day, and Katie and I decided not to book anything. So we just basically walked around and did whatever we went. We kind of just used Google Maps. We went to Alaska Coffee Company, which is just a coffee place down by the berths. We went to Alaska Crepe Company or Alaskan Creperie, one of the two. I know it's moved since we've been there, so now it's more of like a walk-up kiosk type of situation.
So good. We went there twice in one day.
So good. And the people that run it are so friendly. It's, I think, the wife is from Alaska, the husband is from France, and they moved back to Alaska and opened this little creperie. So good. So good. Highly recommend it. But then we just, kind of walked the area, walked through the stores, went up Creek Street, which is so cool and historic to just walk around those little shops there. And then we actually kind of went a little bit off the beaten path and walked all the way up to City Park. It was probably close to 3/4 of a mile or so, but they have the salmon hatchery up there as well. And really just a nice quiet place up there. The Totem Heritage Center is also up there. We didn't go in, but we kind of walked down back around that way. And then again, just walked back down through the city area. We were, again, worried about that whole busing situation. And we only had a couple hours in port to begin with. Like, I think by the time we got to Ketchikan and had our plane to get back to the bus, we only had like 3 hours or so really in the port there. So not a whole lot. I will say my sister did the seaplane tour, and she literally did that. She got into town and just found one of those kiosks that like offered it and booked it and did it. Basically hopped right on a plane there and went and did it, which she was happy they got to do because her and my other sister were supposed to do a helicopter tour in Juneau, and that got canceled and they were devastated. But that is unfortunately one of your risks you take with Alaska is the weather. Very much weather's up there. Your chance of rain is like 80% every day. But then,
well, in Ketchikan, they say is like the rainiest port or place in the United States, which is hilarious because none of us had rain. That was an all-day rain out. Like, I think it sprinkled on my second visit, the tiniest bit, but it was still sunny and all the things. So yeah, I suppose that's one of the things with the changing climate.
We lucked out our first cruise with absolutely gorgeous weather the entire trip. Last summer, not so much. It just, you just don't know.
And you don't know. Obviously, the weather can be different times of the year, but...
So one place that especially Disney doesn't stop super, super often, and it kind of feels like the extra port for a lot of cruise ships, is Sitka, Alaska. My sailing did stop there. We actually really enjoyed it. We did a tour that we booked through NCL. It was bears, raptors, otters, something of another, but it was pretty cool. You got on a bus. They took you to the bear refugee, which is where they basically rehabilitate bears that, whatever happened, they cannot be re-released into the wild, which is cool because you at least guarantee you're going to see the bears. Then they took you to the raptor center where they rehabilitate the bald eagles. That was honestly super amazing. There's also some really nice walking trails there if you have the time to go and explore that. And then we got on a boat and they basically took us all around the Sitka Bay area. You got to see the volcano. We got to see a ton of wildlife, bears, otters, deer along the area. And again, they were just very knowledgeable of the area and the different features. So we had actually really enjoyed that. But you can find pretty much most of your basic Alaska touring options. The downtown area also closes to cars when the ships are in port, which is kind of cool because it's super walkable down in that area. And then Icy Strait is another one that is unique to myself. I will say I'm kind of mid on Icy Strait. It's kind of like a ski resort in the summer, very walkable. And there's also like gondolas, like the Disney Skyliner that can take you to point. You can also pay money to take a Skyliner up to the top of the mountain. One thing they do advertise is that they have a lot of hiking trails right in there. Those trails close all the time because of bear activity. It's like a heavy bear activity area. Just something to keep in mind. Steve and I were on cruises that were like 2 weeks apart. We had the same exact experience. But you can also find a lot of your kitschy little stores in there. One of the like mall areas is built out of an old salmon canning factory that is pretty cool. But you are a little bit light on your tour options. I will say though, it is very close to Juneau. So whale watching is probably one of your best options out of there, especially if you really want to do whale watching and you're doing Icy Strait and Juneau. Do it in Icy Strait because your other tour options will be a lot better in Juneau.
Makes sense.
Let's go ahead and talk about Victoria real quick. I say real quick because your ship is usually only in port real quick. This is unfortunately not unfortunate. There's a good reason for it. There's actually very heavy wake laws around that like peninsula, that Victoria or island that Victoria is on. So ships can actually only go so fast to get to it, is what they told us. So a lot of times Victoria is kind of just this little stop. I think mine was like 8 p.m. to midnight was my port time. It was a real quick in and out. We did a brewery tour, or it was a brewery and distillery tour. I guess it was a very famous distillery, actually. So it was actually pretty cool. And then they just drove us through. Unfortunately, it was dark and raining, so you couldn't really see what they were talking about. But it did make us say, oh, Victoria might be cool to come and like actually see.
I agree. I enjoyed the stop, and ours too was the same. It was like 8 p.m. to 12 p.m. And we did a walking tour that we booked through Norwegian Cruise Line that was super interesting. It took you down along the marina, and the marina has like houses and shops that are like on the water that you can walk along. That was really neat. And then we just went into Victoria and saw some of the different federal buildings. It was really a beautiful, beautiful area. And it was one of those where we said we would go back to and would like to spend more time there. it was just so rushed that you just didn't have, and again, dark. So there wasn't, it's hard to see, but a neat area.
Well, we have one more place to talk about here, and then we'll kind of talk about cruise lines and options to wrap it up. But Vancouver. Now, this is important because this is the port that Disney sails into and out of, which I just think gives Disney an advantage. They're a little bit further north, and they also have easy access to that inside passage here. But we could sit here and talk about all day about where to stay and what to, do pre-trip, post-trip. Why don't you both each give us like your one top recommendation for Vancouver?
The first cruise we went on in DCL, we did the Capilano suspension bridges, and that was pretty cool. You can get the bus. It's a free shuttle bus right downtown in Vancouver to get to the bridges, and then the shuttle bus takes you right back downtown. And so that was super cool. My kids loved that one, especially teenagers. Really neat, beautiful area with lots to do, lots to walk around, eat, and shop in Vancouver. And then, like I said, we did day trips to Whistler both times that we were there. So that's always an option also. But that does take a full day. Like you would need to come in an extra day, I feel like, or stay an extra day on the back end of your cruise. But Vancouver's a really cool city. It can get very sketchy very quickly. And I think we were actually really we couldn't believe how sketchy it got and how quickly it got sketchy. But it definitely, I would say, stay near the port. If you can stay near the port in that area, you're going to be okay. And there's plenty to see with the seaplanes coming and going. Half of our group went to Stanley Park. Loved that. My little nephews did the aquarium there, and they really, really liked the aquarium also. So I think the options are endless in Vancouver.
For Vancouver, that was on our Disney cruise, and we arrived late, 6:30, I think, flights or 6 o'clock flights arriving into Vancouver the day before the cruise. So we stayed at the airport. I've talked about this before, and the Fairmont at the airport could not be easier. You literally grab your luggage and walk a few feet and go up an escalator and you're at the hotel. So if you're arriving late, I think this is such a smart idea. You can take a taxi the next morning, or Disney transportation, I suppose, to the port and drop your luggage. You can drop your luggage at the Pan Pacific potentially, and then walk around and go to Stanley Park, because you could get to Stanley Park by foot, basically, from that location. But what we did on the return is that we had a 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock flight out of Vancouver. So when we got off the ship, we hired a private car who gave us a tour, took us to Stanley Park, had us walk around and see the totems. We went over to the Catalana Bridge. We bought tickets and walked up and did a little hike thing around there. He took us to this place, this market that we've talked about before with Amy, listener Amy, who's been on.
The Granville Public Market?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It is very cool. There's a ton of places to eat there. I would spend more time shopping there. Definitely wish I would have bought some cheese or something. And then just walked around. Our stuff was in, our hired car. And so we didn't have to worry about that. And we got to see so many sights in Vancouver, and then went to the airport. It was kind of a perfect way. If you have a late flight, it was expensive, but it was perfect. And it was just our family. And I would highly recommend that route too.
So I did miss over one thing, and this is not a single port, but glaciers. Most sailings are going to have some sort of glacier day, glacier stop. Your glacier will vary depending on, again, what ship and itinerary. I do think this is pretty important because your experience can vary. And when you do these glaciers, you typically have two main options. You can either stay on your ship and view the glaciers from there, or most cruise lines will offer the small ship experience. Depending on what the situation is, you will either board that before you get into the fjord that you were getting into, or the ship will go somewhere into the fjord and then you will board it right from your cruise ship. In my situation, when I did it on Alaska, we actually did a half day in Juneau and then went to Endicott Arm to go and see that glacier there. So we actually got on the small ship. It was still right next to our ship, but we got on it at Juneau and then we went out ahead of the ship. I was super thankful that we had done that because it was super terrible conditions that day, as I had already mentioned for Juneau. So the ice was pretty bad. We were not able to get very close, even on the small ship, and the Norwegian Bliss could not even get around the bend to see the glacier. So we were super happy that we at least got the experience of seeing the glacier. And that was Endicott Arm for our glacier experience, which would not be my first pick for a glacier day again, for sure. Christy, why don't you go ahead with yours? Because I think Kira is going to have us beat on this one for sure.
She always does. So my first experience was, and I was just looking it up, we did in fact go, which I thought we did, to Glacier Bay on Princess. And then the ship, we didn't do any like ship within the ship experience. Our cruise ship went, there were a couple of different glacier viewings throughout the day, but the main one, the ship went and it does a 360 so that all the sides get to see it. That day was absolute gorgeous weather. We cruised over the 4th of July week and all the kids went swimming on this day. But when we were in front of the glacier, it was absolutely freezing. So then it was really funny that once you were just sitting in the sun, not with the glacier right in front of you, it was so hot. Some people actually did get sunburned that day. And then my second cruise was on Disney and we did the little ship. My husband and I did. My son stayed with his grandma on board. And that was good. I don't personally think from my two experiences that either of them was much better than the other, where Glacier Bay was so much better than the experience on Disney. Honestly, to me, it wasn't. I really did like that Disney brought you closer if you booked that excursion. The thing I didn't like, if I didn't leave the excursion line to go and take a picture of the glacier, it was like South Sawyer. There was like South, and then there was another, which we got to see on the little one, the little boat, the North Sawyer or whatever. But I wouldn't have seen South Sawyer at all if I didn't literally leave the line they were making us just stand in because the boat was late anyway while Disney was pulling up to the glacier. So that to me was a miss on Disney's part, but it was very cool. And it was very different than the Glacier Bay Glacier. But I liked the Disney one a little bit better because you could see the different coloring of the ice, that day. It had more of that blue ice view where, as opposed to just like a wall of white glacier. I don't know how to describe it, but the Sawyer Glacier was very pretty.
On Disney, we did do the Glacier Explorer where we got off and went, and it was incredible. We did the South Sawyer also. And I think what was more incredible for us was just the ride through the fjord, even though it was kind of miserable weather. I mean, you just everywhere you looked was just something cool. And we have the coolest pictures of the Disney Wonder in the background of like the fjord with the mountains behind. I mean, just truly incredible. And I agree with you, Christy, like the ice that was floating was just this crazy, crazy blue. I mean, huge blue chunks. I've been to Glacier Bay now twice. And I will say our cruise through the fjord on DCL to get to South Sawyer is still hands down my favorite thing. It's just the beauty of it was gorgeous. Glacier Bay is an all-day thing. I mean, you start in the morning and it goes into the afternoon until you get into all the different glaciers. I think in the Glacier Bay, we saw a lot of wildlife. They did a great job of putting up a map and telling you, around between 8 and 9 a.m., expect to see, whales in this section. Between 10 and 11 a.m., you're going to see otters, and they were spot on. I mean, we stayed outside the entire day, and you do see 4 or 5 different glaciers, but, the wildlife was definitely pretty incredible. The views were better on DCL. We also, on this cruise that we did last summer, we got to go to the Hubbard Glacier, which is, I was just looking it up because I knew I wasn't going to, the face of the Hubbard Glacier is 6 miles wide. Incredible. And we did the Glacier Explorer for that one as well. And it was the coldest, rainiest, crappiest day, but we were out there the whole time because that glacier was calving. They said the more rain and the wetter it is, the more calving. We saw some of the most incredible calving from the Hubbard Glacier. And the conditions were so bad that the Sapphire Princess could not get close. And I don't know that those people saw as what we saw because of the fog. And so being able to see it up close like that was pretty incredible. So the Hubbard Glacier, I think that was a bonus for us to be able to see that. Again, I agree with you. The cruise into the South Sawyer Glacier was pretty incredible.
I will say, I will give that to Endicott Arm. You get that very pretty sail through into there. And they took time to go into some little inlets when we were on the small ship to see some of that. And that was, the mystery of it is pretty cool too, because you're going into this fjord, like, wow, this is pretty. And then you start to see the little icebergs and you're like, okay, that's cool. And then it's like more and more. And a lot of times there's wildlife in and around it. We had a lot of seals, I believe it was, and little baby seals as well when we did ours. But yeah, I mean, I think Glacier Day is like a big day for your sailing. And it's kind of nice to have that like interactive sea day as well. Like, you don't have to get off or do anything necessarily, but you're still seeing like a highlight of Alaska. The last thing I wanted to discuss, Kira, is just a little bit of compare and contrast between your various sailings here. You know, what would you consider a highlight of each of these cruise lines? If you were to do it again, would you be drawn to one of your 3 cruise lines specifically, or would you venture out and try something different?
Sure. I think, we all know that the level of service that you get with Disney Cruise Line is just, you can't compare it to anything else. You truly can't. The Sapphire Princess was the cruise that we were on with Princess Cruise Lines. That ship is like 5 or 6 years newer than the Disney Wonder, and it literally looked like it was 15 years older. It was in rough shape. I mean, it truly gave you a sense of how well Disney takes care of their cruises, their ships, their product. It really did. The food was okay. We didn't actually do any specialty dining because we just didn't want to be tied to a dining room time. And so we just did the buffet a lot, and they have a really great wood fire oven pizza, and we ate in some of the ports also. And so the Sapphire was fine. It's just obviously a very different clientele than what we're used to on Disney Cruise Line. And so I would go on Princess again simply because of the itineraries and the different options with the itineraries. And I think if I did Princess again, I would pick a newer ship. And then as for Norwegian, like I said, that was a very last minute cruise that I booked. I will say, like, the ease of booking that cruise, very last minute on their website, super easy. We did a room upgrade. Like, it's very different than Disney. We booked an inside stateroom, but we bid for a exterior room with a veranda, and we got it. We had a very clean room. We had a great stateroom host. The food on there, if you went to the specialty dining, was fantastic. The MDRs on Norwegian Cruise Line were not good, but their specialty dining was fantastic. So I don't know that I would do Norwegian Cruise Line again. I think they're just more geared towards the Caribbean and kind of a party ship, and that's just not Alaska. But the price was right and the timing was right, so that's why I did it. But I would love to go on Disney again.
We didn't talk about the characters and their little glacier outfits. And I realize this is not a reason necessarily to pick a cruise line, but also they're so fun. Mm-hmm. And the camaraderie that you can have just waiting in line for characters is also amazing. Making friends, though, and just
it's magical.
It is magical.
Yeah, it really is. And it was rainy for the day that our characters were out on deck. So they just moved them under the awnings that were out there. So it worked out fine. But it was pretty cool. And even my big boys who were, 17 at the time thought it was pretty cool to see the characters in their outfits. And yeah, it was really, really cool. We actually did concierge on that trip. And so they come the characters come in their outfits out into the concierge lounge or out onto because we were on the Glacier Explorer. But yeah.
You're right. We did get that. That's how I got Mickey on the front of the ship.
Yep.
They invite you out to, yes.
But I mean, they all had their pluses. I have no minuses with Disney. None. I do have, cons with the other 2 cruise lines, but I really don't have any with Disney.
Yeah. So my only experience was also Norwegian, and I was on the sister ship to the Encore, the Bliss. We booked the Bliss because it's touted as being purpose-built for Alaska. I will tell you right now, it is not the right size of ship for Alaska. It's got a pretty big, cool pool deck area. When that weather is bad and everyone's got to stay indoors, everything is crowded. It was too much. It is not the right ship for Alaska. Again, I think the Encore falls into that same category. I won't tout. I had the same experience service-wise on Norwegian as well. So that being said, if I were to book Alaska again, which I absolutely will be, I think 2027 is our tentative game plan for that. Disney is still in the running, but really my advice is to really look at your ports and your port times and make sure those are what you were looking for, because the Bliss had a lot of days where you were only in a port for maybe 4 hours and then it was switching out with another ship. And that was a major loss for me. We had a great cruise. Do not get me wrong. Loved Alaska. Again, enough that we want to go back. I did not get to see Skagway. I think Skagway is a must, especially in comparison to Icy Strait, which I would not plan on visiting again if I have the choice. Again, I think Disney offers a really great itinerary. but a lot of cruise lines have a lot of really great ports and a variety of itineraries. So again, look at what those are and try to decide what is right for you. Now, any cruise in Alaska is probably going to be a great cruise. Don't get analysis paralysis like I do over the absolute perfect sailing. I will say I'm leaning towards Disney. You have 2 sea days through the Inside Passage. That's kind of a port day you lose, which feels kind of like a con to me.
No, but the Inside Passage is so magical.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I mean,
literally
we just sat outside and took it in, and the scenery is literally forever changing. And the British Columbia part of the Inside Passage is absolutely incredible.
And there's wildlife, and like you're going to love taking pictures. I'm so glad that you brought that up so we can talk you out of that idea, because it is a port, frankly, because it's so beautiful.
Agree.
No. That went right where I teed you up for.
Perfect. Then there you go. Done.
Yes.
Because I actually tell people, you only get 1 Inside Passage day on some other cruise lines. And that's definitely something to consider.
When we cruised on Norwegian Cruise Line, we left out of Seattle, and because the ship is so big, like you alluded to, Lake, it does not go in the Inside Passage for very long. So we were out in the Pacific almost the entire cruise, which made for a lot of seasickness. My sister-in-law was so sick, and so were a lot of other passengers. But we saw so many whales. Never have I seen that many whales on either of the other cruises than we did on that cruise out of Seattle. But the trade-off was you're not in the Inside Passage and you just don't see that beauty. So
I will ditto that, but we had terrible weather and it was foggy pretty much. So you didn't get to see anything on that sea day. And yes, that weather going up the Gulf of Alaska there, if that's technically considered that part, is rough.
Yeah. I do want to just say that all of the excursions that I booked, I just did a lot of research. I did a lot of reading reviews on TripAdvisor, Viator, and then I would go directly to those different like Alaska shore excursions, private Hummer adventures, and book them directly on my own. Just that's how I got all the ideas that we did. So
I love that. Yeah. Some of the most amazing excursions you will ever go on, and some of the most beautiful places you will ever see on an Alaska sailing. Well, Kira, I do want to thank you so much for coming on and also filling out the Be a Part of the Show form. I was so excited to see all of this Alaska on your resume here. I think it made for a really exciting episode. I think our listeners, especially those gearing up for Alaska sailings this summer and even in the future, are going to really enjoy this one. So thank you again so much for coming on and having this chat with us.
Absolutely. My pleasure to share it all. I'm just trying to figure out how I can get back this summer to keep the streak going.
Yeah, do it. And then come back and give us a trip report.
Yeah.
Yes, please do. And if you do any other DCL sailings,
we can do Alaska at the back end of our Hawaii trip.
See, perfect.
Well, Christy, where can our listeners follow you?
You can find me all over the internet at Pack Your Pixie Dust. And Lake, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram and YouTube at MouseGen, and you can follow the podcast at DCL Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and become a Patreon member at patreon.com/DCL Podcast. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the DCL Podcast. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Well, that's going to wrap up the show. Once again, we want to thank Kira for coming on and sharing her numerous experiences in Alaska. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. We'd also like to thank our Patreons who help make the show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/DCL Podcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. And we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.